Hey, go ahead and sit on that floor mat or stools. We also have some standing room behind our sitters. Just keep an eye where you step so nobody gets squashed and we're all good to go. All right. Hey, everybody. How are you doing today? Good, good. Well, my name is Nick. I use he or they pronouns, and I am a museum educator here at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And I am a big fan of tiny creatures. Now, this is going to be a 10-minute program, so if you need the restroom, we've got men's, women's, and 2 accessible gender-neutral single-stall restrooms in our foyer directly outside of this exhibit, and we also have some drinking fountains out there as well. You can eat in our ground floor cafe and gardens. We just ask that you don't in our exhibits and our halls. And as you may notice, there is some shifting background sound and some critters on the screen in this exhibit. It may be tempting to get distracted by a huge megalodon, but I want to know, what is the smallest thing alive that you have ever heard of? The smallest living thing that you know of. Go ahead. Yell it out. That's small. That's pretty small too. These are all very small. Think smaller. Smaller. Well, you're going to have to think even smaller than that, because this living thing that we're talking about today is so small, you can't even see it with your eyes. You need a microscope to see it. Today, we're talking about diatoms. Now, this diatom is a pretty little plankton, and it floats around in most wet places, especially oceans. And there are a lot of them. Now, this guy right here is super tiny. Our phyla is made up of just one tiny cell, and a cell is the smallest part of a living being. And you and I are made up of trillions of tiny cells. So why should we care about something that's too small to see with our eyes? Like, what could possibly be so interesting about this little dude? Well, brilliant both under a microscope and when seen from outer space, tiny diatoms team up to change the world. And those tiny diatoms connect us to huge creatures of the past. But our diatom friends don't have a time machine, so how does that work? Well, ancient diatoms, maybe this guy's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, they have left us clues that let us learn lots more about what the prehistoric world was like. And they've been around since the Jurassic dinosaurs roamed the earth. Now, who can tell me what a fossil is? Bones? Really old stuff? Stuff that you see in museums? Yeah. Fossils are evidence of ancient life that's at least 10,000 years old. Well, the fossils of those tiny ancient diatoms would over millions of years eventually turn into this black gooey stuff. And this goo is asphalt, though a lot of people call it tar, so we're going to call it tar today. Raise your hand if you've ever been to our other museum, the La Brea Tar Pits, or if you've even ever heard of tar. Okay, now that's a good amount of you. Well, if you've ever been to our La Brea Tar Pits, you might already know that just a few inches of this sticky stuff could trap huge animals like our mammoths. This is a mammoth molar. And short-faced bears, like this short-faced bear skull over here. And saber-toothed cats, like your saber-toothed cat skull right here. And all of these bones have been preserved in that same tar that took them down when they were living animals. Well, how did a bunch of these little guys become this deadly goo? Well, they can become tar because diatoms have a really unique body. Now, stick your hand out. We're going to do an imagination exercise right now. Imagine you've got an M&M in the palm of your hand right here. Now, don't eat it. Instead, we're going to imagine that the chocolate is oil and that the outside candy shell is glass. And then you got yourself a diatom, pretty much. That glassy shell sinks to the ocean floor with millions of other little tiny diatom shells. Then over millions of years, they get covered with more little tiny diatom shells and mud, and the strong pressure of the ocean squashes them down. They heat up underground and turn into this. We can also find their fossils as diatomite rock, and we can see their microfossils under microscopes. Like this. This is a bunch of diatoms under a microscope. So what? Why might black goo and microfossils from ancient diatoms be important for scientists? Any ideas? Yeah, that's where we can find some of the bones that we have today. Tar is really good at fossilizing bones. And a lot of fossils that we tend to think of, like the ones that are in our dino halls, are more rock than bone. But fossils found in tar are pretty much the original fossils frozen in time. And the better condition a fossil is in, the more secrets we can reveal from the past. And even the diatoms that didn't become tar tell us secrets about the past. If you're a paleontologist, you might get really, really excited if you were to find ancient diatom fossils like this diatomite near or around fossil bones that you dig up. And that's because ancient diatoms are not very good at keeping secrets. Different species of diatoms can be picky about where they like to live. And there's been a lot of different species of diatoms throughout history. So if you found fossils of lake diatoms or shallow water diatoms, or diatoms that prefer different climates, or diatoms from different time periods, you could find out what the environment of that animal might have looked like, or even find out what time period they were from. And, give me a drum roll, great news, our tiny diatom friends are still alive today, and they work together as a team to create a surprisingly enormous impact. Today's teams of teensy diatoms keep our world running smoothly. Now we're going to imagine again. Go ahead and put on an astronaut hat right over here, helmet, and now you're in outer space. You're an astronaut in outer space in your spaceship. You look outside your spaceship window, and you see this happening back on Earth. Now, what is happening in the ocean? What do you think might be happening? Some weird weather. Maybe there was a smudge on the camera. Diatoms? Well, these are what we call algae blooms. And this happens when millions of tiny diatoms swarm together, so many that the ocean looks like a different color from outer space. And it's a really good thing that we have so many diatoms on Earth. Okay, and go ahead and take that helmet off. We're back on Earth. Take a deep breath in. And breathe out. You can now thank all these diatoms for about a quarter of that oxygen you just breathed. And that is half of the entire world's oxygen that diatoms produce. Because diatoms are phytoplankton, that means that they go through a process called photosynthesis, and they create oxygen that we breathe. And plants, they go under photosynthesis as well, as you might have already learned. And our diatom friends, they produce more oxygen than all of our rainforests combined produce. They're also the start of nature's food webs, which means that they're very often the first food that gets eaten in a long line of organisms that are eating each other and being eaten by each other. Do any of you like to eat fish? Well, that means that you are a direct part of that food web. And food and oxygen are very necessary things for us living beings on Earth, big and small. So it's really important that us humans learn to team up like our diatom friends so we can keep our oceans clean. Healthy diatoms means a healthy world. Whew. Okay, well, big stretch because, wow, we just went through a lot of big picture talk in a short amount of time. But it's time to get back to just right here, right now, you and me. How many of you like to draw? How many of you like to draw a bunch of cool shapes and designs? Well, if any of you artists need any inspiration, diatoms are a really great muse. Sometimes people even call them jewels of the sea or pearls of the ocean. And there is an entire art form that is around diatoms. Artists will rearrange these diatoms under microscopes into all kinds of patterns, kind of like a living kaleidoscope. And these dazzling diatoms spark excitement to explore more of life's tiny wonders. I know that they inspired me, at least, because now I'm the proud father of a ton of tiny pets. And if you're curious about tiny life after this program, I can show you some photos of my tiny children. So maybe next time you come across a little ant or a little bee or even little sprouts of green growing from a crack in your sidewalk, you might take a moment to wonder about and appreciate their place in this world that we all live in a little more. Now let's wrap this up. Diatoms, they bring us joy. What else did we learn that they do today? They create oxygen. Diatoms help us learn about the past. Diatoms are the start of nature's food webs. And yes, diatoms are really pretty. Brilliant both under a microscope and when seen from outer space, tiny diatoms team up to change the world. Now, I've got a challenge for you while you're at the museum today. Well, I know big animals like dinosaurs and megalodons are really impressive and important to learn about. I challenge you to draw or take pictures with tiny life in our museum or gardens today and then email them to me at tinynhm@gmail.com. I've got some cards with that email address and some drawing paper and pencils up here. So I encourage you to come up to get those, but also to touch some fossils, look at photos, or ask any questions that you might have. Great job sitting and zoning in today. We really talked about a lot of big concepts, but you all did an amazing job keeping up that energy. Thank you so much for spending time with me and our diatoms. Have a good one.